sweet energy right now in the room. Let's see. Well, good morning. As Gregory said, my talk today is called The Bows of Our Boats. And I'll talk more about that in a few minutes. Right now, and I think Gregory will appreciate this, I like opening with a joke as well. So I have a new one for you. And this comes from a friend of mine named Pat. I will mention him later too. So it's about these two elderly women. Can I see a show of hands, all the elderly? No, I have a friend I talked to the other day, and he says, now that we're middle age, I'm saying middle age, does that mean we're going to live to 130? But anyway, these two elderly women going down the road, just in the middle of the day, some avenue in their town, and so it's Mabel driving, and Gladys is sitting in the passenger seat, and they're going along, and Gladys is just kind of like, watching as they're driving, as Mabel's driving. Gladys, she thinks, wait a second, did Mabel just run a red light? Well, maybe I wasn't paying attention. Maybe it didn't happen. I'll just have to keep an eye on that. And sure enough, Mabel runs a second red light. She says, oh my God, she did it. If she does it again, I'm going to have to say something. And sure enough, Mabel runs a third red light eventually. And finally, Gladys says, Mabel, you just ran 3 red lights. And Mabel says, I'm driving? So, the theme of my talk today is about being present in our lives, and maybe the driver wasn't totally present in that joke. I have as happens as we get older, we start to lose friends. Friends begin to pass away, and I have a dear friend. Her name is Tana, and just a month and a day ago, she passed on in her late 50s, and she had an experience where cancer came. She dealt with it. It went away. It came. It went away. It came a third time, and the doctor said, "I'm sorry, but there's no way out of it this time." Excuse me. And Tana was a person who, it seemed like life was always kind of hard for her. Like she had a difficult childhood, brilliant in so many ways, one of the funniest people I knew, artistically talented, smart, clever, but could never quite put her life together. I always felt like she was carrying this weight, this baggage of her childhood, how she was raised, and things like that. And I went and visited her about 8 weeks before she passed. We don't live super close, but I went and sat with her. And she looked the best she had ever looked. But some part of her had finally let go. Like she set down all that weight, all that baggage she'd been carrying her entire life. It's like, oh my God, it feels like she was just finally at peace. And she talked about how she couldn't wait to meet her ancestors and on the other side, but it's like, it was remarkable, the difference once she just let go. And doesn't it kind of beg the question, why don't we all just do this while we're alive and well? Sometimes maybe we're carrying this invisible weight that maybe we don't even are not really aware of. And it really struck me. And I spoke with a lot of other friends and said, yeah, she just seems so at peace now. Just how beautiful that was to see. And she did eventually pass, several weeks later. It was on the 6th of December. And that evening I was looking at my wife's eyes, looking at Heidi's eyes, and as often happens, my wife will say, what's going on? What are you thinking? She can tell when my mind is grinding something. And I said, well, I felt like I was having this experience, through Tana's passing a few hours earlier, of just this awareness of truly, truly, truly being in that present moment. And it felt like almost like this wave. I was riding this wave of the moment, and it reminded me of like the bow of a boat, and that's why I'm talking about the bows of our boats. That almost like that little wave just in front of the bow that's just kind of pushing the water. And I felt like I was just kind of in that with Heidi. And doesn't that always happen when someone passes? We go, oh, I got to make this precious. I need to remember. Remember to stay alive, because sometimes we go on automatic, don't we? You know, like Gregory was talking, you know, some things can just automatically move, but can we be pristinely aware in this present moment? And I began to hear these 4 lines of poetry in my mind as I was looking in Heidi's eyes. And she said, "What are you thinking?" I said, "Well, I'm hearing these words," and I recited them to her. We are the bows of our boats, the leading edge of our venture. There's so much down below that you may never see. And she said, "Well, do you want to get up and write it down?" I said, "Yeah, I think I need to." And so I went, and it became this whole poem. I'd like to read it to you now, and it looks a lot at what I'm talking about. Now I will, this reminds me, have you ever been to like a retreat or a talent night and someone says, "I'd like to read a poem," and you realize they're holding 12 pages of stapled together, so when are we going to get through this? So this is the length of, in case you're afraid. Okay. We are the bows of our boats, the leading edge of our venture. There's so much down below that you may never see. I think that was part of the story with Tana. There's a lot of weight, you know, kind of down the hold of the boat. You don't always see it all, but you can feel it. We are each moment in time, the way we face our future. The one you see in these eyes is not my history. And that's what it felt like with Tana that day, like she dropped her history in a way, just was that present essence of spirit. Would everyone please breathe? It's happening again. I'm getting, if the room breathes, I can breathe, I think. And if you feel some weight, it's holding me together, a ballast, to be sure, for when I hit rough seas. And there was that history. It's still that sense of that's her personality. But that's not who I am, or barely who I was ever. So catch me if you can in every breath's release. Just stay present in that moment for who we truly are, beyond our history, beyond our weight that we carry. So may you gleam and may you shine, and find your place beyond time. And finally, may you know that sweet line that is you and not you beyond time. We are the bounds of our boats. I want to read a quote from Byron Katie. Do you know her name?
Yes.
She says a lot about, being with what is. We're always fighting what is. And she kind of looks at that. I think this applies to Tana's situation. She wrote, "The only time we suffer is when we believe a thought that argues with what is." The only time we suffer is when we believe a thought that argues with what is. When the mind is perfectly clear, what is what we want. When the mind is perfectly clear, what is what we want. I think Tana finally just let go into what was really happening, instead of struggling with what wasn't. Another quote, Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj, "Past and future are in the mind. I am now." Past and future are in the mind. I am now. So how do we stay awake in that momentary leading edge? How do we do that? I wrote a song, Wave After Wave. Some of you know that song. Well, I'm wondering if this is really about the one wave. Maybe it's about one wave. What if we're just like we're riding this one wave through every moment? And maybe that's a good way to keep ourselves aware of that. I'm always riding that one wave. Henry David Thoreau said a quote that kind of applies to that. I love this. I thought this was kind of cosmic. He said, "The meeting of two eternities, the past and the future, is precisely the present moment." Isn't that interesting? Two eternities. It's like we're riding that wave between the two. So how can we make that riding the one wave a joyride of sorts? Heidi was telling me the other day about this woman. She was reading about Esther Rubin. She started something called the Happiness Project. And she said she was a happy person. She is a happy person. She thought, how can I be the happiest that I can be? And she started to really evaluate, what makes me happy in my life? What makes me happy? And she had this interesting kind of revelation, because it's also, sometimes it's about not necessarily agreeing with what everyone else thinks. Maybe we get caught in this kind of peer pressure, well, everyone thinks this, so I should think that. And when she was really honest with herself, this is interesting, especially to me, she said, when she was honest with herself, she realized she really didn't like music that much. Isn't that interesting? Just to say, I don't really like it, but you can't say that to people. What do you mean you don't like music? But that's a great example, I think. Maybe there's something that you think you're supposed to like, but I really don't like it that much. Maybe just be honest. And what does make you happy? And so Heidi and I have been looking at what makes us happy in our lives, and does that make you happy? And I think that's one way to keep riding that wave, to stay present. And how do you bring joy to riding that wave of moment to moment to moment? There was a way that this happened to me a few years back. I was on my first trip to Japan, and I was on a 747. You know how they have that hump in the forward part of the plane? So it was a coach seat, but it was up in that hump. And that's kind of right behind where the cockpit is. And it was my first trip ever to Japan, flying across the Pacific. And as a kid, I grew up a family with 4 kids, and my parents were great. And they somehow got this floor-to-ceiling map of the world, which was in our kitchen, next to our kitchen table. So we'd sit there at breakfast or at dinner and play games like, can you find Lisbon? Or who can find Perth, Australia first? Things like that. So I was kind of getting to know the world on the wall. So here I am about 2.5 hours out of San Francisco heading to Tokyo, and I'm thinking, I wonder if we're over all the windows are down because people are trying to sleep. I'm thinking, I wonder if we're over the Aleutian Islands yet, because I'd always seen them on the map, but never seen them in person. So I kind of raised my window flap really quick, like, poof, poof, and in that moment I saw the Aleutian Island chain right there. It's like the timing was just right. Now this was in 1997, so it was before some things changed with the airlines. And the Japan Airlines flight attendant, she walked up to me and said, oh, would you like to see those from the cockpit? I thought, what? And we don't do that, but yes, please. So she walked up and knocked on the cockpit door and asked if I could come in. And the 2 pilots turned around and said, yeah, come on in. And so, wow, great. And it's a pretty big cockpit. There's the pilot, co-pilot, and then there was a 3rd seat behind them. They said, here, have a seat. They had a sheepskin on it, and just great. So I'm sitting in this seat, and they raised the visor so I could see the Aleutians in both directions. And they start chatting with me and saying, well, is it are you going business or pleasure? I said, well, a little bit of both, doing some concerts and workshops and just wanting to see Japan for the first time. And and they said, well, what do you do for a living? I said, well, I'm a musician. I play guitar. And, oh, what kind of music? I said, well, and I never know how to describe what kind of music I do. I said, well, actually, my guitar is just outside in the closet. Would you like to hear a song? Sure, bring it on in. So this is me riding the wave of that moment. Just what's available next? What's available next? And so I get the guitar and I start playing the song. And it's a song I'd just written at the time called Like a Bird. It's on one of my CDs. It's sometimes I feel like a bird flying over the ocean. They couldn't have picked a more perfect song. And I didn't even realize it when I was doing it. It just kind of came out. And by the end of the song, the co-pilot, the younger one, he turned around, he was just mesmerized. I thought, gee, I hope this thing's on automatic pilot. and he said, wow, are you going to be doing a concert in Tokyo? I'd love my wife to hear that song. And I think so. We're still possibly setting one up on it. So I got his information. Concert did end up being set up. I had someone call him and tell him the directions. And I got to tell that whole story using a translator. And then the punchline was, and on the back row is my Japan Airlines pilot. The whole room went, ooh. So just being available for life. I mean, you never know what can happen step to step to step. Just openings. Being on the bows of our boats, that leading edge of our venture. How can we stay awake with each wave? Another interesting thing happened. I mentioned Pat, who told me that the Mabel and Gladys joke, and I told it at his memorial service. He passed about 6 years ago. He was a child star, an actor on Broadway, and then in TV like Playhouse 90, Ripcord, My Three Sons. He had little bit, guest appearances up through when he was about 24 years old. And I'm still close with his widow and his daughter. And when they mentioned that he was on My Three Sons, there's this Me Network on cable, have you seen that? I just started recording every My Three Sons and finally I saw that he was, of all the days he was going to show up, because I wanted them to see him. And I was able to look ahead on the schedule. Guess when he finally appeared on My Three Sons? Christmas morning. It was like his Christmas present back to the two of them. And I let them know about it, and they got to watch it. And what a present, what a beautiful present. And in the process, I noticed online, there's something called IMDb, an internet movie database. And he has a little entry there, but there was no photo. And I think Pat needs his photo online, because otherwise it's that like ghosted silhouette that means nothing. So I found out I had to become a member, which I guess means pretending I'm a movie star. I had to join and have a pro account in order to then put photos up online. So I did that. I became a member of that. And finally, it was all these technical things I couldn't figure out. I kept emailing the tech department. Finally worked it out and got his picture online about 4 days ago. And then I went for a walk in the park. I like to walk regularly. And Pat, according to Pat's daughter and widow, his way of kind of communicating back is he'll leave dimes. People, they'll find dimes, they know it's Pat. Well, guess what I found within an hour of posting his picture on the internet? There's a dime in the road around walking in the state park. It's like, hello, Pat. So, just being available, paying attention. That was one of his great phrases, pay attention. Always pay attention. So we are the bows of our boats. I can tell one more story about Pat, and then I'll start to close. I had a birthday a few years ago, and I invited his widow. Her name's Judy. And at that time, Pat had been gone maybe a couple of years. And she doesn't do email. In the email, I said, no presents, just come. We'll have a nice get-together in the backyard. But she didn't know that, so she comes with a little present, gift bag. And she said, yeah, before I came, I said, Pat, so what should we give him for his birthday? And she hears Pat say, go in my closet and look, there's a shirt for Charlie. Now, Pat's a lot smaller than I am, and so I don't think one of his leftover shirts is going to work. So she pulls it out, and it has a tag on it, like it's just been purchased, but he's been gone for a year, and she said, yeah, I found this shirt in there, and I tried it on, it was my perfect size. Like, how did that get in your closet? How did it get in Pat's closet? And both she and the daughter both said, no, we went through all his clothes, that shirt wasn't there. What happened? So we all just came up with some miracle, and listening to Pat, he made something manifest. So I, as a kind of for fun, I like to write thank you cards. I wrote a thank you card a few days later, addressed to Pat at her address, and it said, dear Pat, thank you so much for the shirt. I can't wait to see what you get me next year. Hello, Charlie. Well, lo and behold, next year, same thing, another shirt. She looks, there's another shirt in the closet. Inexplicable. And she brings it and says, I don't know, there's another shirt. It's like the same story again. What is going on? So, anyway, you never know. Just riding this wave of life, being available, listening, paying attention, being available to what's coming our way. Since I was reading a quote, I was reading the text in Course in Miracles yesterday, and this is such a simple phrase, and maybe it applies to how can we just stay alive in our happiness. A sense of separation from God is the only lack you really need to correct. That sense of separation from God is the only lack we need to correct. And how do we correct that? Where does that happen? It happens in the present moment. Riding that wave, looking for what keeps us happy. How can we be a gift? How can we stay awake for all the interactions that are available? You know, if I just said, no, never mind, I don't need to see the cockpit, that would have gone nowhere. Let's play. Let's stay awake and play in these moments. So I'd like to close this actually by 10 minutes later, this poem, The Bows of Our Boats, became a song. So I'm going to use this to close my talk. So we are the bows of our boats.
No.
We are the bows of our boats, the leading edge of our venture. There's so much down below that you may never see. We are each moment in time, the way we face our future, the one you see in these eyes is not my history. And if you feel some weight, it's holding me together, a ballast to be sure for when I hit rough seas. But that's not who I am, or barely who I was ever. So catch me if you can, in every breath's release. Catch me if you can, in every breath's release. So may you gleam, and may you shine, and find your place beyond time. May you know that sweet line, that is you, and not you, beyond time. That is you, and not you, beyond time. That is you.